Welcome back to Finish First Financially. Goran Radanovic here. I've got a question from Reddit. I'll quickly read and give my take on it. Obviously, it's not financial investment advice. It says, I just made the worst financial decision of my life and is now dawning on me. I financed the car for 5 years, and with insurance and the car payment, it comes out to $900. I'm 22 years old and my insurance is high. I can afford this, but it takes half of my paycheck. I make $20 an hour and I get paid bi-weekly. I also live with my parents. I had no choice but to finance a car. I wanted to buy a cash car, but I wasn't going to be able to get to work. Not sure what he means. Maybe he means it wasn't going to be reliable, although we don't really know that. And then he also added, my car payment is $450 and my car insurance is $444. First of all, there's a big fascination amongst people with cars because they feel that it gives them status. And this young man, I presume it's a man, has already made quite a big mistake financially. I made the car mistake when I was about 25, 26 years old. My car payments in total were about 30% of my salary. His is even worse. It's half of his salary and he still thinks that he can afford it. He can't afford those payments. I mean, paying half of your salary just for a car is absolutely ridiculous. And can you imagine earning $10,000 and then you're paying $5,000 for a car? And that sounds ridiculous, but that's actually what people do who have conditioned themselves to spend, because the more money they make, the more they feel that they can spend. And that's exactly why you see a lot of athletes who are making millions of dollars who end up broke because they just keep spending more and more. So what's happening at the moment is that this person is actually programming himself to be a spender, and he's just building and building on top of bad financial habits that are going to stick with him throughout his life if he doesn't correct this one mistake. Even though it's a $900 mistake, remember, the more money he earns, the bigger the mistake is going to be. So the first thing that I would do in this situation is I would look for a way to get out of this deal. So now the fact that he's gotten into it, he's obviously got outstanding debt, and then the interest is increasing. Or the interest is building up throughout the 5-year period. And so for the next year and a half, maybe even 2 years, he's going to be paying off just the interest alone. And my goal with this vehicle or in this situation would be to get the equity to be on the same level as the outstanding debt, so that if I'm able to sell the car, that I sell it at the very worst at break even, so that I don't end up owing any money on it. So that would be my goal. And then obviously that's going to take maybe a year and a half, maybe even 2 years to get to that point. And during that time, I would be saving money to buy a car for cash. So within 2 years, I've got, say, $3,000 or $4,000 to buy a reliable used vehicle, and that you absolutely can get reliable vehicles for $3,000 or $4,000 that will get you from point A to point B. It's not going to be a fancy vehicle. The mileage might be high, but there are Toyotas, Hondas that have proven to be very reliable. And I would much rather take a risk on a $3,000 or $4,000 vehicle that I've paid for cash than to pay $900 for a car that I've now financed over 5 years. That's a much bigger risk, to me at least. That's what it is. So first of all, the insurance premium is completely ridiculous. It's almost as much as the monthly payments for the car. This is the thing that people need to look at when they're buying a vehicle. Not just look at the purchase price. There's obviously maintenance, repairs. Even if your car goes out of warranty, you're going to have to service the car yourself. If it breaks down, you need to understand how much the parts are going to cost. And one of the most important decisions that you also have to consider is the resale value, the resale price that you can get for this car 3 years down the line. That's extremely important. How much is the car going to depreciate throughout the years? Because eventually you're going to have to sell it. And these are things that most people don't look at because they're so fascinated with cars. They just look at, oh, I have to have it. Like he said, I had no choice but to finance a car. No. You absolutely had a choice. You could take public transport. You could walk. You could buy a car with cash, wait a couple of months and pay for it with cash. There's always a choice. Don't go into this mindset, no, I just have to have this finance car because I feel that it's going to be reliable. New cars break down all the time. So don't feel that just because you've got a newer model or a new car that it's not going to break down or that it's got less of a chance of breaking down. Sometimes it's got even a bigger chance depending on which model you choose. So for me, to program myself to become a saver, I'm going to buy a vehicle only with cash. I'm going to save up the money until I've got the cash for it, and I'm only going to spend about $3,000 or $4,000, especially if it's my first vehicle that I'm buying. $3,000 or $4,000 is enough. I need to learn how to drive. I need to learn how to respect my vehicle, take care of it before I can go on to buy something that's going to cost me more than that. And I need to prove to myself that I'm worthy of having this finance vehicle later on, which I wouldn't even go down that route. But if I was, these are the steps that I would take. Obviously, with my situation where I was spending 30% of my salary, that's way too high. I would not finance a vehicle ever again. I'm only paying for it with cash. And here's another crazy rule that I follow, which most people never do, but it's just something that's helped me in life. If I'm going to buy a car, it's going to be 1% of my net worth. So if I want to buy a vehicle that's $10,000, well, then my net worth needs to be $1 million. It's as simple as that. Obviously, if you're buying a car for $3,000 or $4,000, that's not to say that now your net worth needs to be $300,000 or $400,000. That's acceptable if you've got $3,000 or $4,000 to pay that with cash. But it's just a simple rule that I follow, because why would I want to spend more of my net worth on something that depreciates in value? Why would I want to dedicate more than 1% of my net worth to a liability? To me, it doesn't make sense. So in this case, I'm getting out of this as soon as possible until I can pay this car off to the point where the equity is equal to the outstanding debt, and then just clear that. So sell it so that I don't have any more, I'm not underwater. I don't have any negative equity. And then during that time, I'm saving cash to buy another car so that I own it and I don't have to pay anything to the bank. And that's going to be a step in the right direction of making wise financial decisions. I'm going to be living below my means. I'm going to be paying everything with cash. And if you want to see how I ended up without anything, losing everything, becoming homeless and living in my car, and then eventually having to pay that off, you can check out my book, From Homeless to Debtless with Savings. I'll put a link in the description below, and I wish you all the best.